Well, hi Jewers, hi, I'm back with the 23 books of 2023 and I loved this book. I got it at charity shops, going to go back to charity shops. Someone actually had been done some writing in it before, so little bullet points. Must be someone's academic studies because it's quite an academic book, but the way it's written, it's anyone can enjoy it. So, okay, it's called Library by Matthew Battles, An Unquiet History. Library and Unquiet History. Okay, and read the blurb. It's quite long. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit of trimming. Through the ages, libraries are not only accumulated and preserved, but shaped, inspired, and obliterated knowledge. The library has been a battleground of competing notions of what books mean to us, from the clay tablets, collections of ancient Mesopotamia, to the legendary libraries of Alexandria, from the burned scrolls of the Qing dynasty, to the book priors of the Hitler Youth, to do decimal system to the internet. Right. Now, I love libraries. Obviously, I get a lot of my books out, which I review from libraries or charity shops, and they're fantastic, aren't they? They are marvellous. I went to the library when I was quite young, for about 5. My grandmother and I had a bit of a contentious relationship. However, one thing I will always give, and this I actually read out at her funeral. She got my first library card. That was her. So, and I was like Matilda reading those books. My mum used to, because I'm the youngest of 4, so when my mum was doing the shop, she used to drop me off at the library and then go and do the shopping and then pick me up afterwards. I used to sit in the corner for an hour just reading books. Oh, I love libraries. Libraries are just amazing things, aren't they? Just the knowledge in the stacks. And there's academic, there's classical, there's people's personal libraries. Hey, if I was at home right now, okay, I would be surrounded, okay, by my 7 bookcases, my own little library. So, I love books, I love libraries. And this one thing is, book is quite chaotic. It really, really is, okay? It's been here, right. This is a chapter called Reading the Library. And the way it goes back and forth in history and the various people, it's not a complete history, but it's a chaotic history. Right. I say unquiet, I call it chaotic. Right. It's bit here. The flood of forces us to ask, how do we sort it all out? Until fairly recently, that is to say the last couple of 100 years, with a short interval for the library, librarians could have counted themselves among the stoic followers of Seneca, who in his Explicit Morals wrote that it doesn't matter how many books you have, but how good they are. Right. Here you go. In the medieval, this is a model for the universe because it all created a collection of ideas. In the universal library, by contrast, books are not treated as precious or crystalline essences, at least not in the first instance. Instead, they are text fabrics to be shredded and woven together in combinations and patterns. There you go. History of libraries. Okay? And also, one thing is that this book starts out with destruction. Okay? This book starts out with a title called Reading the Library, but just to show, okay, not just books evolve, okay, but libraries evolve, because precious texts have been destroyed, okay, from the moment they were first created. And from the classical period, historical period, even this, okay, it's about book pulping, okay, this. When King Henry VIII broke with the Roman Catholic Church, the Abbey's new secular owners often simply emptied their books, which they sold as pulp for use in preparing the papers and bindings of new volumes. A few Tudor luminaries saw this for the destruction it was. Richard Cotton, one of the most King's own ministers, secretly saved many works from the bindery, including the earliest still surviving copy of Beowulf. Right, the same thing happened throughout Europe in the early decades of the print era. Here you go. The only extant written example of Old Saxon dialect was found stuffed in the binding of a volume in the Vatican Library. Yeah. Show that it's a cycle. Books and libraries are a cycle, okay, of words and destruction. It's a reminder, okay? And also what libraries mean to people. Clearly, library is very much a class system as well. I mean, it's talk about segregation, face-to-face issues, okay? And this bit here, and also what's in a library. I mean, a medical library for the medical journals, you have that kind of thing. The arrogance behind it. As a fullness of a culture, is expressed in its literature taken as a whole. So the authors of books initiated the significance of the library. Library figures in the works of writers ranging from Shakespeare to Jonathan Swift to Umberto Eco. The library is such an evocative setting that has become a cliche. What a gothic horror mystery be without a gloomy library? Noting the great lateral strength of books, to smack your palms with the spine of the infamous paperback, and you see what I mean. It's true. Most gothic horrors take place in a library. Most cultured moments take place in a library. Because libraries mean so much to so many people, okay? But a library, books are a status. But also, libraries are gothic places, walls full of books, okay? But anything can happen within them. And also, as this book is so much okay about destruction, okay, not just the cycle of destruction. A century after Alexander encircled the city of Alexandria, okay, the Queen Emperor, she had Hungdai, began to connect his fair-flung forts with the stone embattlements which would become the Great Wall of China. According to chronicles, he undertook the most extensive book burning the world has ever known. Right. His aim, the chronicles tell, was to destroy all Chinese literature or history or philosophy written before the founding of his dynasty. When he died, 6,000 terracotta warriors accompanied him, buried together in a vast funeral complex in the Bombay city of Quanah, central China. As the chronicles have it, though he didn't extend the luxury effigy to traditional Confucian scholars, they were buried in person where their books were burned. Right. Cycle of destruction. Destroying the literature and the culture just to make you, what happened before you doesn't matter. Or that history and culture doesn't matter. Books are political. Words are political. They can change. Books can change words and change worlds. Okay. Right. This bit here. The story has been employed as a kind of allegory for the Cultural Revolution. Scholars who supported the government of the People's Republic touted it as a salutary example of a regime dealing properly with a reactionary elite. It's no wonder that the story of Shihadi's burner books is that the Library of Alexander largely mythical. Maybe mythical, but hey, maybe mythical. But there's so much about this as well, okay, between the myth of the burning of Alexandria, that was more than fire that, by the way, right, and this bit here, and also why. Biblical chasms had their reasons, often they're accidental, as well as the torture ships in the harbour at Alexandria. Purposeful book burnings are two kinds. They may be attempts at revision, with Shihadis. Another example comes from the moment of Islam, when the Koreans' ardors burned other religious texts deemed unauthoritative. In this case, the burning was a kind of sacrament. Believers consigned their books to the flames, often very lest they contain the words of truth hidden among the pages of error. Or books may be burned in order to cease the authors and readers from history. That's it. Right, you burn a book, okay? You burn the last book of an author, you destroy their history, you destroy their words. I mean, we're very, very fortunate that so many texts from, let's say, the ancient classical Greek period have survived, okay? Plato, Aristotle, not much of Sappho, but the fact that some exist showed she exists, if you will. Now, it's so easy now in the digital age to get hold of books. Books are in the public domain. Go and put a Gutenberg, you just download them. Go on Amazon, you can just download them for nothing because they're in the public domain, okay? But the fact that something survived of their words showed I was here, if you will. Right, see? Okay. And interesting as well, when it comes to later periods, like the Roman period, right? This bit here is the Roman elite went to Greek for schooling. No formal competition existed for writers and artists as they had in Greece, nor did the state pay for their salaries or engineers, physicians, teachers, or other professionals who depended on the patronage of individual senators or the imperial house. In this light, the flourishing libraries of Rome are unique. They are the nearest thing Rome had to incorporated official cultural institutions as we know today. Imagine the library as like a university, scholars coming together. They had to go to Greece for their formal education, okay, because there was no there. So libraries became a place of scholarly pursuits. People sitting together, reading, writing, learning from each other. They became the universities of their day, and it was a library. See, the evolution of it all. Right, here you go. And it's interesting as well because so little survived of this period due to the burdens of the wars or the conflicts. But one thing I absolutely love is that due to this period, Pompeii and Herculaneum, yeah, things survived, written words survived of this. Now, I've actually been to both Pompeii and Herculaneum, they're incredible places, is due to the fact that they burned. Right, this bit here. Researchers working on fragments of Herculaneum offer the tantalizing possibility that they may find lost works of antiquity among the fragments. But even if the last few characters offer up nothing new, one thing is certain: the most complex ancient library accessible to us today survived because it was burned. Because it was the library of Herculaneum and Pompeii. They burned, and because of that, they survived. Right. And one thing I give this is the history of books as well, because clearly books were written due to Sumerians, they were written on clay tablets. Then the ancient Egyptians papyrus is then the later Christians on codex. Is the evolution of books as well. Did not just of a library, but the evolution of books, and it kind of shows how from one way to another is how so many other cultures got the influences from others. Okay, say like you're in like an art gallery, as I was in one in um Budapest, Hungary. Okay, I was in the National Gallery looking around. I was chatting to one of the creators, who absolutely lovely, and said that Hungarian art is inspired a lot from French art. Okay, I take this way. I take the kind of influences. The classical was originally French. Okay, and even points out here, right, is Islam, and really there's a lot of focus here on Islamic texts. Okay, much of the Western book culture owes its heritage to Islam. The conquerors learned well from their new subjects, taking their forms and crafts in the books and raised them to new heights. From their Chinese prisoners, Muslims and the art of papermaking as early as the 8th century. For Arabic scribes in Ethiopia, they borrowed the form of the codex, refining the stone leather binding into an art of great sophistication. To the Greeks and Romans, books had become tools, utilitarian repositories of knowledge. The scrolls they made were spare and plain, often for artistic comforts, only the words they contained. The calligraphers and illustrators of Islam, by contrast, made the book excel for thing of beauty, and collectors came to value the sumptuous look and feel of the books as much as the writing they conveyed, which is true today. A beautiful binded book is a thing of beauty, isn't it? With the illustrations. And one thing I do know is that the British Museum actually did an exhibition on this a short while ago. I didn't get a chance to see it. So, yeah. And as you move along later on from the classical period to more modernity, okay, the kind of Western civilization more coming in, is libraries really became a status symbol. Libraries legitimized you as a school, as a scholar. Now, one thing is this, is when it comes to John Harvard, okay, right, in 1635, he died 3 years later, leaving his estate to the new school established of preachers up the road, up in the road of Newthorne. The core of his gift was 260 titles, some 400 volumes in all. Harvard's collection reflected his Puritan beliefs. About 3/4 of his books was of theology, most in biblical commentary, and collectors of Puritan sermons. Okay? The school was grateful, taking the state benefactor's name. Right. That's how Harvard got its name. Because John Harvard left them his books because they were grateful. Because suddenly they were legitimised. They had a library. They absolutely had a library. And further along, it talks about the British Museum as well. And now there's a library for that, British Library. Okay. And when the British Museum opened in 1753, it was modest by standards of other such libraries across Europe. At its opening, it contains at some 51,000 books. At the end of the 18th century, number had declined to approximately 48,000. This was because the museum library housed much duplicate material, which librarians audaciously sold off or gave away as practically as they could. Right, okay. Then as now, book collecting was fashionable, and fashionable people tend to buy the same fashionable books. The new library depended on such genteel collections, given a purchase with the museum's meagre funds to buy its own store of books. Yeah, they had to sell the books to buy new books. Okay, and also is cataloguing as well. Now, we take cataloguing pretty much for granted, but one thing is it's kind of like a global thing. People coming in, making changes to libraries, people bringing in new ideas. And the cataloguing of the British Library happened to a revolutionary. Now, we think of librarians being dull, you know, the stereotypical librarian, okay? But this guy here called Antonio Panzizi, okay, who he was tried for treason, skipped over the Alps, and was from of Modena, and he was political, arrived penniless, and began to catalogue the British Library. Yeah, that was his thing. He began to catalogue the books, because back then it was like chaos. It took this long, okay, to actually start building an actual catalogue of books. And then further along in 1848, okay, the Dewey Decimal System. Now, the Dewey Decimal System, if you go into a library, okay, say you're looking for an academic book, okay, it would be by author, but it'd be in a section, it'd be numbers written on it. He developed the Dewey Decimal System, right, who was named after the son, Melville Louis Kossuth Dewey, in fact, named after, okay, who was named after an exile, okay, here you go, here's a bit here, right, created this. The Dewey classification for all its manifest impact on libraries and experience of them high exhausts Dewey's influence on the library world. Indeed, nearly every aspect of it bears his stamp. He pioneered the systematic education of libraries, founding the first library at Columbia in 1889. He launched a company, the Library Bureau, to peddle furniture and office supplies, and high efficiency-minded aesthetic of interior design to libraries big and small. In helping to found the American Library Association, it's the standards for the profession, both internal, it doesn't say in terms of expected education, ethics and standards of work, and external, the role of the librarian in society as a whole. That's Dewey. He revolutionised the library and the librarian. Right. So, further along, it gets to the dark times, the dark period. The dark period of the Western world, okay, which the little goose steppers and Nazis came in and started burning books. And the Nazis, and prior to this, okay, with the original, the First World War, libraries were absolutely destroyed. Right. And this a bit here, okay, about them. In 10th of May 1933, the books of authors displeasing to the Nazis, even those including our own Helen Keller, were solemnly burned on the immense Franz Josef Platz between the University of Berlin and the State Opera. Okay? All afternoon, Nazi raiding parties had gone into public and private libraries, throwing onto the streets such books as Dr. Goebbels in his supreme wisdom had decided were unfit for Nazi Germany. Helen Keller, for God's sake. She was to the Nazis, okay? She was considered as an aberrance, okay? Just seen as nothing. And her books were destroyed. Because, hey, she was blind and deaf and she, she wrote books. Right, hey. Yeah. It talks about, and I said before, by destroying someone's work, you are destroying their life. Imagine someone's life work. This was before, imagine an author, okay, who never been published outside their country, just a collection of books, small books, okay, all be destroyed. Their life's work, they're destroyed. That's it. Everything they've written is destroyed. Right. Here you go. Destroying a library, however, is the crudest form of editorializing. Libraries left intact, they become tools of oppression and genocide, so they offer canons that restrict the conceits of mystical nationalism and the will to purity. As Richard Wright relates in what is the climatic scene in Black Boy, his wretched autobiography of libraries in the Jim Crow South not only deemed some books off limits, it exported the notion that some people were unsuited to the readers. If the new library offered great progressive hope, they could deliver unbearable pain of holding that hope. That's true. That is true. The Nazis burned books, which is terrible, by the way. Books you're never ever going to get back. Okay? They destroyed culture, they destroyed art. That they deemed unfit. But then you have places like America where people of African heritage were denied going into a library. Books were segregated. There were black libraries, but they existed on the kind of generous donations, okay, from others. And here, what he did, and I'm actually going to try to track down this book, okay, Richard Wright's book, Black Boy. What he did, okay, he approached Mr. Falk, a Catholic man who had noticed the bigotry experienced at the hands of Southern Protestants. Reluctantly, the man agreed Wright could only use his card and forward his name on notes requesting books, but only if he accepted full responsibility if he was caught. This gentleman, okay, Mr. Wright, went into these libraries, okay, and pretended that he was taking his books out from Mr. Falk, right? Wright reminded her that he'd run errands in the library for Mr. Falk before, but she remained uncertain, asked him whether he actually planned to read the books himself. "I know, ma'am," Wright responded. "I can't read." Yeah, he had to go into this library and pretend that he was taking his books out from Mr. Falk, but he read them himself. Dangerous and daring. Right. It was a dangerous time for Wright, for his newfound bookishness excited the suspicion of the white men who lorded it over him at work. "Boy, what you reading those books for?" "Oh, I don't know, sir." "That deep stuff you're reading, boy. I'm just killing time, sir. You addle your brains if you don't watch out." Right. There can be no doubt that Wright's reception at the library was typical at this time. Black North Americans, North and South, faced condescending misunderstanding and outright hostility in public libraries. Yeah. Outright hostility in public libraries. Yeah. So it shows how, obviously, now anyone can go into a library. It's not a big deal, okay? I'm going to go to a library very soon. But it shows how the history of a library is about burning, oppression, hostility, okay, power, and also shows how the history of the times change. It's affected in the society. It's an incredible book. It's an absolute incredible book. And I absolutely loved it. So, as it's interesting too, coming, to books and education as well. Now, libraries are public, but once they were better for a society that couldn't afford books, libraries were a place to actually learn. So, I really, really enjoyed this book, Library and Unquiet History by Matthew Battles. It is chaotic. It is chaotic to read. It goes back and forth. It's trying to do a little bit too much. But for the history of libraries, I so enjoyed this book. I learned so much. So, and some of the things about libraries we take for granted, like the decimal system. Okay? And I'm signing off here. Bye now.